Greetings, my friends. I hope you're having a great day. I wanted to share with you something very exciting. I am a ham radio operator, an amateur radio operator. My call sign is Kilo Juliet 7 Victor Victor Kilo, but I am a relatively poor one, and the only radio I have so far is this little Yaesu FT70D, which works on 2 meter and 70 centimeter. It's only good for local stuff. You can talk to repeaters and get a little further distant. And I've often wanted to get into some of the more esoteric aspects of ham radio, including high frequency work, 10 meter, 20 meter, 40 meter, that kind of thing, where you can, depending on the time of day and other conditions, can talk to people, well, all around the world using either your voice, Morse code, or other types of modes like digital and TTY. The point is, the gear to do that tends to be somewhat expensive to get into. But a good friend of mine who had some gear sitting around that he was not interested in keeping and did not use, gifted me a whole bunch of ham radio gear, including some high frequency stuff. So what I'm going to do, it's in these crates here. I'm going to take these crates, I'm going to put them on the floor, and then I'm going to show you some of the highlights of this. It'll be like a little unboxing video, and then in later videos we'll go over the specific details of each one. You'll see what I mean, because some of this gear is a little old and it's going to need some restoration work, but it's very exciting stuff because some of the stuff is really cool. So with that, I'm going to take these, put them on the floor, and we'll start pulling stuff out and looking at what we got. All right. If you can't tell, I'm very excited about this stuff, and I'm incredibly grateful to my friend for giving me this stuff. The first thing to understand is most of this stuff is pretty old. Some of it's from the 80s and maybe even a bit earlier, and much of it hasn't been used in all that time. So it'll be interesting to know and figure out what parts of this equipment are still good. I mean, most of it is either solid state or is just purely, doesn't have any moving parts, so most of it should still be good. So the first things that I found in the crates were these antenna pieces, and I'm not totally clear on these. These are one of the things that I haven't done much research on yet. I get the feeling that these are mobile antennas of some kind because they are duct tape or taped together with some segments here, and I'm assuming that they are in varying lengths so you can adjust the lengths for the frequencies that you're working on. And there are a couple of mounts here that have, like, there's a magnetic mount here, and I can't show you the other one because it's like 6 feet long, but it's a mobile, or excuse me, it's meant to go on a bumper. So it's a big long bracket, kind of like this one here, but it attaches to a bumper, and it's like 4 or 5 feet long with a couple of segments. So that's interesting, but really that's not the coolest bit. These antennas are neat. I'm going to look into them and figure out what they can be used for, and I will know more at some point in the near future. So there's like 5 of these things, so I need to figure out exactly what kinds of work you can do with those. But the first thing that came out here is, you can see it's pretty dusty. This is a Kenwood MC50 microphone stand, and the microphone is also in here, right here. This is very cool stuff. Let's see. I don't want to knock anything over. So the mic is right here. I'm guessing this is, yeah, it says it's a dynamic. It was pretty obviously a dynamic. It's the MC50. Haven't tested it yet. It's got a 4-pin circular connector of a type I'm not familiar with. I'm a voice actor, so I work a lot with microphones, but most of the mics I'm familiar with use XLR connectors, so I'm not totally clear on what type this is, but it seems to be fairly standard for this kind of rig. It fits together and so forth. Again, haven't tested it, but I have no reason to assume that it's not going to work. This has been kept in a climate-controlled environment. It's just a bit dusty. I'll probably want to, pop open the case and clean everything out and, just make sure it's pretty and clean inside and wipe everything down. So that's very cool. So that's the first bit of kit that I'm really excited about. Then there's this thing. This thing is actually really cool. It doesn't look like much. Honestly, it looks pretty grotty, but this is a radio frequency watt meter. It's an RF watt meter, and what you do is you hook up your transmitter to here, and then you connect your antenna to here, and when you're transmitting, it tells you the carrier power right here, and modulation, forward, reverse switch, and it will actually handle up to 2 kilowatts, 2,000 watts. Now this one, before I even consider trying it on anything at all, I'm definitely going to be taking it apart and cleaning it out. But again, I have no reason to assume that none of this equipment will work. I mean, the needle does move when you tap it. It's clearly still functional. I'll need to verify that everything is working right, but it certainly looks like it works. So, you know, this is pretty cool. It just needs to be cleaned up. It's really dirty, but, you know, it's just from sitting in a box for 30 or 40 years. Next up on the hit parade is this fun antenna tuner. This is an MFJ 901. I did some research on this, and this appears to be a relatively early version of an antenna tuner from a company that still makes them. The ones you get these days are much sexier. They've got, like, you know, they're much larger. They've got many more options. They've got little needles, and many of them have lights and so forth. This one is real simple. But inside there's a big air coil, and the air coil is tapped to these switches here, and then there are two air gap or air dielectric capacitors in here. They're like old TV tuners. At some point maybe I'll take this thing apart and show you a video about it, but there's like 3 parts in here. They are very simple. The purpose of this device is to be able to match the impedance of the transmitter to or match the impedance of the antenna to the transmitter, because the transmitter will generally expect 50 ohms impedance, and if it's not the right impedance, then you'll have problems. So by adjusting this with an antenna, with an SWR meter, which I don't have, I need to get one, you can determine, or you can adjust the antenna so that it will be the proper impedance for the transmitter, which will prevent the transmitter from either not working well, being inefficient, or in the worst case scenario from damaging it, which is theoretically possible. So very useful little bit of kit. And again, there is no reason to think this thing doesn't work, because these things are so dirt simple. There's no capacitors in here or anything like that to degrade. It's literally, or no electrolytic capacitors. Everything in here is purely mechanical. I'm going to open it up, clean it out, make sure there's no dust, and, you know, that all the wires are connected right. But yeah, it's a very simple piece of kit, and I'm really pleased about it, because it's pretty much bulletproof. This one is actually really interesting. This is a DSI 3600A frequency counter. It weighs like nothing at all. I had to do a lot of research on this, because these are popular, but this particular model, I couldn't find the manual for it. I found a manual for this one, the 3550. So I'm assuming a slightly different version, or maybe the earlier generation or something like that. But this is simply a frequency counter. It has 2 inputs. One is called a pre-scaled input, and I'm not clear on what that particularly means. The other one is a regular input. And it will show you the frequency of whatever the connection here. This is a PL2, or sorry, this is SO239, but it connects, you put a PL259 on here and coax. You can actually, the instructions that I found showed how to make a probe, and it described just taking a piece of coax and stripping it off and wiring a resistor to it. And it's like, it was clearly written sometime in the 70s. That's the vintage of this thing. But I was just like, okay, they were definitely, you know, everybody was rolling their own back then, and I think it was awesome. So I'm actually probably just going to do that and test this thing, but there's no reason to think it doesn't work. This is this is a piece of analytical kit. It's not really necessary for transmitting, but this is the kind of thing that you would use to verify that you are transmitting on the right frequencies, or that your transmitter's frequency is matching what you're trying to send, that kind of thing. It's useful for that kind of thing. So next up is this lovely little bit of little bit of kit. This is a low pass filter. Now, a low pass filter is, you don't see them being used as much anymore. These used to be super important for any amateur radio operator, or any ham operator. Because if you were operating in the high frequency bands, there was a really good chance that either a slightly mistuned antenna, or just using a lot of power, or just bad luck, and you could start interfering with television and radio reception for your neighbors. And that created a lot of problems for people. They did not like that because, if you're trying to watch, Howdy Doody or we're talking the 50s and 60s and 70s. So if you're trying to watch, some show, if the Lawrence Welk Hour or something like that, or you want to watch the Love Boat and you can only get it on one of the 4 broadcast channels from the nearest big city, you're going to be a little annoyed if all of a sudden your signal goes out every time somebody keys up their mic. What this does is you hook up one end to the antenna and one end to the transmitter, and I actually don't think it matters which end. I'm pretty sure they're bi-directional. And inside there's just some coils in here, and it's basically just an inductor that is completely transparent to frequencies below a certain point, but as soon as you get to a high enough frequency, immediately the impedance just rockets up so that you can transmit all you want on the high frequency channels for amateur radio. And as soon as you start varying or bleeding into, and your harmonics too, like any harmonics will just instantly die coming out of here. So you don't see these as much anymore because everything is digital and run by cable and you don't get as much broadcast. That said, there is still some broadcast television. And so I might actually put this to use because, they don't hurt anything. And it could definitely be a way to just help protect the people around me. There's not a whole lot around here, but this is a neat little bit of kit. You don't see these much anymore. This was apparently made in Bellevue, Washington. So it's very cool, very neat bit of kit. A low pass filter. Let's see. And then next is, okay, this is a heavy bit. I'm actually going to leave that there. This I'm going to show you though, because this is really the cool part. One of the pieces that I'm really, really excited about. This, I don't have enough room to put it in here right. This is a Kenwood TS130S single sideband transceiver. This transceiver is probably, this model was made from about, I think, late 1979 all the way into the mid 80s. This particular version, this particular model, I'm pretty sure was made in 1981 or 82. It's still in functional condition. The person who gave it to me, he would use it occasionally to listen. It hasn't been used to transmit in a long time. I have no reason to think that it wouldn't be capable of transmitting, but I am going to take it apart. Well, not completely apart. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to check the capacitors. It's fully solid state. There's no tubes in this gear. But I'm going to check the capacitors. All of these knobs and dials, they feel just perfect. I don't think I'm going to even need to clean them. I was thinking when I was told I was going to get it that I might need to clean these up, put some deoxit or something in them. But no, they're just smooth as butter. So I love that. This is a high quality piece of equipment. It is a single sideband transceiver. It's in theory it's 200 watts, but it only drives 100 watts at the antenna. It's 200 watts on the finals. But it handles single sideband and continuous wave, which is Morse code essentially, and it goes from 10 to 80 meters, I believe. So it's a really, really great little transceiver and handles pretty much every band that any amateur radio operator would want. This is in megahertz, so 3.5 to 30 megahertz, give or take. So yeah, super, super excited about this. Got to get it cleaned up, make sure that everything is working, but I am really looking forward to getting this on. I can't actually use it to transmit anything until I have an antenna, so I'm ordering some parts and some pieces so that I can ascend. First thing I'm going to build is what's called a half-wave dipole, and that'll be fun to start getting myself onto the air. So each of these pieces, I'm going to be following, some of these pieces anyway, I'm going to be sharing with you as I work on them. There's one other piece here that I wanted to show you that I was really excited about. This is so cool. This came in the box as well. This is a continuous wave key or a Morse code keyer. Hold on just a second here. I'm setting up a signal generator because this thing isn't hooked up to anything right now. And this thing is connected to a speaker right here. So basically I've just got a signal generator that's just sending a 600 hertz signal into this. And then when I hit the key, it will generate a tone. This is what's called a Coffin Bug Key. And a Coffin Bug Key was made by High Mound, is what they called it, and it's the BK100 key. This is based on the Vibroplex keyers, which Morse code keyers, the originals, they just had a paddle that you would just tap and just go dit dit dot dit, you know, and you had to make every dot and dash manually. These ones used a vibrating arm to make the dots. So you could go K is, you know, dot dot dash, S is dot dot dot, and then you can make, so you only need to press it once to make the dots. The trick with these kinds of keys is that they are a little bit trickier to work with and they take a little bit of learning. I'm only just learning continuous wave, but I'm super excited about this one because this is actually from like the 60s or so, I believe. It's pretty old and it's in perfect shape. I just love it. It works great. Obviously it sounds great. You can hear it. And I'm just really excited to learn more Morse code, more continuous wave stuff with this because it works perfectly and it'll be really exciting to get that on the air. I've got to make a plug for it and so forth that will hook up to the Kenwood, but aside from that, I think it's just about ready to go. There is one other thing I wanted to show you, and that'll just take a moment. Let me move this to the side. I don't know if I can actually bring it up here easily because the thing is pretty big. But luckily it isn't very heavy compared to the Kenwood. It's this monster. This is a Swan 500 transceiver. This beast is from the 1960s. And is tube driven. It is using, if I remember the diagrams correctly, this uses two 6LQ6 tubes in its final amplifier. And you control the plate and the grid voltage and the load with these knobs. There's your mic gain, balance, and the various bands you want to work on. This is the kind of radio that when you wanted to use it, you'd have to turn it on and wait for about half an hour because otherwise it would drift all over the place as the tubes heated up. So I'm really looking forward to seeing if I can make this thing work. The problem with this one is, from what I'm told, it's been sitting in a box since probably the 1960s. I'm not even sure it was ever actually used at all. It may be completely unused, although it does have marks on here. I think it did get some use, but it definitely hasn't been used since the 70s at the latest. And that means that I got to take this thing open. I got to open it up. I got to take all the capacitors, all the electrolytic capacitors out. I've got to replace all of those, the filter capacitors and the power supply over here. It's a separate power supply. It's a box about half this size. Has these big giant electrolytic caps in it. And there's some risk to working with this kind of thing in here because this thing generates something like 800 volts to bias some of those tubes in there. So, you know, it can be pretty dangerous. So I definitely want to take my time with this, but this is the kind of thing that as I have some more time and get a chance to work on it, I will definitely document what I'm doing with this because it'll be a lot of fun. And like this one, you know, you can hear it scraping on the knob and stuff, but it's definitely going to be an interesting thing to replace or to restore this one. But, you know, it seems to be in pretty good shape. Like I said, I don't want to power it up until I've cleared everything and made sure it's all working or it's all safe to work with. But yeah, that's going to be exciting to see if that one can be made to work as well. So look for videos on some of these specific components, especially as I start building an antenna. I've got some ideas for a dipole, and we will, you know, look into showing you how I'm going to clean up this watt meter and test it and so forth. I've got some equipment coming, like a dummy load and some other things, so I can test this equipment without possibly damaging things. So definitely look forward to that and keep an eye on the channel, subscribe, thumbs up and all that. And I hope to see you next time when we get to start playing with some of this equipment. And in the meantime, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this half as much as I did. Have a good one.